Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and I am back with a couple more cards using some more of the new products from Simon Says Stamps Stamptember 2019 release. So I had mentioned in my release and review video that I really loved this Flora background and how I wanted to heat emboss it and do some, watercolor effects, etc. So that's what I'm doing. I have my MISTI stamping tool, and I took out the foam pad because this is a red rubber cling background stamp. Usually, more often than not, I just have stamps like this. I just put them face up on my desk and I bring the paper to it. I don't use a MISTI or anything like that. But I wanted to stamp this onto the textured side of watercolor paper. I'm using just Canson XL watercolor paper here. And since I'm stamping on the textured side, I wanted to use my MISTI so I could stamp it a couple times to try and get, as even of an impression as possible. I'm just using my microfiber cloth because I wasn't wearing long sleeves when I made this. It's one of the things I like about, once it starts getting cooler out and I'm wearing cardigans literally 24/7. It makes stamping easier because then I just pull my sleeve, over my elbow or over the heel of my hand, and then I can just like press down and rub it that way. But when that's not easily available, just use a cloth. It just makes it a lot easier to get a more smooth impression. So I stamped the image twice onto this watercolor paper with Simon's clear embossing ink. I had already used my anti-static powder tool and brushed off the excess, stamped it with the clear embossing ink, and then the first layer or the first piece was done with detail white embossing powder, and then I repeated the process and used detail gold embossing powder because, as usual, I couldn't make up my mind what colors to use, so I thought, why not do two while I've got everything out, working on it. Plus, I was curious how some of these colors were going to work. So after all my stamping, covered everything with embossing powder, melted it all with my heat tool, made sure everything was melted. For the piece that I did, the white heat embossing, I'm using 3 different shades of Nuvo Shimmer powders. I have done a bunch of videos using these powders, over a dozen at this point. They're just fun to play with. So I used 3 different colors. I have Falling Leaves, Green, Parade, and Atlantis Burst. And I've mentioned this, hopefully I've mentioned this in every video I've done with these. Do not squeeze the bottles. You will end up with a pile of powder. I just hold the bottle and tap it with my index fingernail. Just a light tap. That gets the powders out. So I sprinkled all 3 of those colors directly on, and then each one of those individual colors has different colors of pigments in it. That's also the beauty of these powders, is you never know what you're going to get. So sprinkle all the powders, and then I sprayed it heavily, heavily, heavily with water, like tons of water, and then set it aside. Kind of wipe down the mess. I could have just moved this board and used the other board. I know. Some days Anyway, set that aside to dry, and then the one with the gold heat embossing, I'm using 3 different colors. I'm using Catherine Wheel, Solar Flare, and Golden Sparkler. Now, people have asked me, and this one is fun, when the water really starts to hit, this one's really fun. I love how right now it looks like nothing, and then you start adding the water, and it just literally starts to burst. It's gorgeous. Love it. Anyway, people ask me a lot, like, do I seal these? Does the shimmer rub off? Not really. I've honestly never sealed any of mine. I will link to a matte spray sealant that you could use if you really wanted to. I will say the red pigment, especially in the Catherine Wheel, because and I've mentioned this before, red pigments have a mind of their own. They like to get everywhere where you least expect them, and they get everywhere. But I generally don't have a problem with these, but I'm also very aware of them. But yes, you can use a matte sealant. Once my cards are done, it's not like I'm like handling them in that sense, so I don't worry about it. Anywho, back to the cards at hand. I ran some different cardstocks through my little Xyron Creative Station Light to put adhesive on the back of them, since I'm die cutting multiple layers, and these are going to be a little bit finicky. So this was the easiest way to do it. I have some gold pearl cardstock, a piece of white gloss cardstock from Ranger, and then just regular white cardstock, and ran those all through. Ran my bone folder around the edges so that when I peeled off the release backing there, it takes away any of the excess sticky, so you don't have that just hanging around. And then I'm going to die cut each of these layers with the large Thank You SWIRL wafer die. So I have all my layers ready. I'm going to run these through my die cut machine. I do have a metal shim in my little platform here. So I have my Platinum 6 with the main platform, then the metal shim, cutting plate, my cardstock that has adhesive on the back of it, my wafer die, and then another cutting plate. And it cuts through like butter, no problems. So I'm going to die cut all of these layers. And in the end, I want 3 layers for each sentiment. So there's going to be 2 layers of just regular white or heavyweight white cardstock. And then the top layer, which one will be gold and then the other one will be the gloss white. You could just do all white cardstock, like instead of the gloss white, you could do all white cardstock and then add, you know, crystal glaze, etc. to give it that glossy effect. But this is faster. Just die cutting white, because I was like, oh, I can just add some gloss to give it, you know, that little extra something. And I'm like, I am not going to do that. That's going to take me too long. And I will almost for sure guaranteed smear it when it's such a large sentiment with such fine detail. So better to be safe than sorry. Die cut it from gloss cardstock. So I layer all these together. I leave the base layer in the first piece. It's so much easier to line everything up. And then I just stack the second layer of white cardstock die cut. And then in this one, it's the gold. The other one will be the white. So stack all of those together. So it just gives it that extra like weight and dimension to them. And then I trim down these backgrounds. Now they are completely dry. That is my biggest thing with these, is like just letting them dry naturally and not fiddling. I tried really hard. I did take a paintbrush to a couple areas just to move the color a bit and to kind of clean things up. But for the most part, I let them dry, just air dry, and let them do their own thing. And they just, I'll show at the end the shimmer. It is something else. So once I have those backgrounds trimmed down, I am adhering the sentiments, just peeling off the backing and then pressing them really, really well into place. And then I did use a tiny little bit of multimedia matte in a couple areas, since I'm adhering over like something that was heavily shimmer plus the heat embossing. So adhered my sentiments. And then to finish off the sentiments, I am using the CZ Design All the Thanks stamp set. And I am just using a scrap of black cardstock. And I'm going to stamp this little sentiment that just says "for everything." I'm going to stamp this twice onto this black cardstock, and I'm going to heat emboss each one with the white embossing powder and one with the gold. So just sprinkle on the white, tap off the excess, and then sprinkle on the gold on the second sentiment, tap off the excess. And then I can melt both of these with my heat tool. Once they're both melted, I am going to use one of the smallest dies from the Nested Banner wafer die set that came out a while ago. It's one of my favorites. So I have the smallest one, which is like the perfect fit for the sentiment. So after I've melted them, I'm just going to tape the die into place with some washi tape and then die cut each of these with that little wafer die. And then I decided I was originally just going to stamp sentiments on the insides of the cards, but after like die cutting this one and then also like just the heat embossing on the black and how it looked, I decided to stamp the main sentiment, and also because I have the coordinating wafer die set for it. So I stamped one of the larger sentiments from that same All the Thanks stamp set. I say this all the time. I love Kathy Zielski's. I love all her stamps. I love her snarky sense of humor, but I really love the clean look of a lot of her sentiments. So stamped the sentiment again twice on this black cardstock. One is going to get white heat embossed. One is going to get gold heat embossed. I really love how I'm using literally the exact same supplies, just different colors, and how it looks so completely different. So melted both of these again with my heat tool, and then I'm going to use the coordinating wafer die to die cut each of these. So after these are all completely melted, I can tape the wafer die into place again with just a little bit of washi tape so that it doesn't move when I run it through my die cut machine. So got that completely melted, and then die cut both of these sentiments. After I'd done this, you can't really tell because it's been like off camera, or the top has been off camera, but I really didn't like where I had adhered the sentiment on this like red watercolor piece. It was too low and it was driving me insane. I really considered completely redoing it, but I didn't want to do that. It was still so pretty and I didn't have time and I didn't want to scrap it. And I was like, I am going to make this work. So I just trimmed off the top. So it's not, you know, a smaller layer than the card front, but then I just centered it on my card base. So I added some craft tacky glue, glued it to my card front, and then I just piled on a bunch of Simon's acrylic blocks to hold it into place. I like that they have the curved, like the wavy edges. So I just like fit them together to make a block big enough to completely cover my card front, and then, you know, added a few more as weight just to hold that down, because these pieces were a fair bit warped thanks to the amount of water they were sprayed with. And then I did the exact same thing with the second one. This one didn't need to be trimmed down because I actually, you know, centered that thank you sentiment a bit better. So sometimes I can get away with actually peeling the sentiment up and like moving it, but with this one it just wasn't going anywhere. So trimming it down just works. So both cards aren't, you know, the exact visually the same layer wise, but I'm still okay with it. It's a way to salvage it without having to completely start from scratch. So I adhered my little sentiments, and then I adhered the larger sentiments to the inside of each card. And then I wanted to finish off the inside since the outside says, you know, thank you for everything. And then I added the eternally grateful. And then I grabbed the for all you have done sentiment from that same all the thanks set. And with the bluish green card, I stamped the sentiment with Simon's green leaf ink. And then with the reddish gold card, I stamped the sentiment with burnt orange ink, just to kind of tie it all together. And then as a final little bit of embellishment, I pulled out some Studio Katia crystals. I have the golden sparkle crystals and the jade crystals. So the jade really pick up the blues and the greens. And then the golden sparkle crystals, they're technically clear and they just have gold glitter in them, which I love. I'm going to have to order more of these eventually. So sprinkled those, of course, throughout both of these card fronts. And then I'm just going to adhere these into place with my craft tacky glue. Just picking them up with my jewel picker. And then once these are adhered, these cards are done. So today's video is part of a massive, massive blog party. There are dozens upon dozens of designers. There will be links on the Simon Says Stamp blog. I have a special coupon code that will be in my blog post. So I will link to my blog post directly below the video. And you can check that out, as well as like my supply list, links to all the supplies I used, etc. So you can check that out below if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching, for subscribing, for thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.